The goings-on in merry old England greatly affected the goings-on in North America, especially its British colonies, land development, trade, commerce, and settlements. Before he died in February 1685, King Charles II was received into the Roman Catholic Church, but there is good evidence that since before his restoration, he had been a secret Catholic at heart. He was buried in Westminster Abbey. Just as he had always wanted, his brother James became King James II. Even though he had fought hard to make sure James succeeded him, King Charles knew exactly what would happen when he did. He predicted that James would ruin himself within 3 years. His calculation was perfect. James lost no time returning England to the Catholic faith. Protestants seethed as he gave Catholics important government and other official posts. They gritted their teeth in rage as James opened negotiations with the Pope to return the English Church to his jurisdiction. The only comfort James's opponents had lay with his 2 daughters, Anne and Mary. Both were Protestants. Mary was married to the prominent Dutch Protestant William of Orange. So even if they had to put up with the Catholic James for now, he would be succeeded in time by a Protestant reigning queen, maybe 2. Then, in 1688, something happened that changed the whole picture. Let's find out more with author Ian Dale and historian Gareth Russell.
A monarch who is associated with the revolution, which doesn't actually happen that often in British history. His name is King James II. He ruled from 1685 to 1688, so a fairly short rule. He became king in 1685 when Charles II died. The monarchy had only been restored 25 years earlier, so it's a really interesting period. But let's go back to the beginning. Tell us about his childhood, his education.
The childhood's blissful, actually, and that will bring with it its own complications in that when it shatters, it's devastating to him. He's born in 1633 at St James's Palace, and he is the second son living of Charles I and Henrietta Maria. It's a very happy family unit. It's a large family, some siblings that die in infancy. This is the 17th century, but broadly speaking, James is brought up as Duke of York, with his brother Charles as Prince of Wales, and he very much expects to sort of be the spare, and he's quite contented with that role. Early love is the army. But when he's 8 years old, it all starts to fall apart with the coming of the Civil War, and he is there on the quote-unquote front line as the Stuart monarchy realises it's imploding. And so him, his brother Charles, their sister Mary, who's the first member of the British royal family to carry the title Princess Royal, have to flee with their parents out of London on the eve of the Civil War, and they initially decamp to Hampton Court. And it's this quite surreal environment. In early modern palaces, they take all the furniture with them as they go. So because it's such a last-minute arrival at Hampton Court, it's empty, and they can't find any beds for the royals to share, and eventually they find one in an abandoned lady-in-waiting's room. And so it's the king, the queen, and these 3 children huddled together for warmth on a January night in 1642, and the next day they find out Parliament are coming to try to apprehend them, so they flee again to Oxford. And when the royals lose the Civil War, he comes back to Hampton Court and spends time with his father in what will be their last time together before the royal family again split apart. And James is evacuated. The legend goes they're playing a game of hide and seek, and royalists are waiting for him, so it's a really long time until someone finds him, because they get him to France, where his cousin is Louis XIV and his mother's managed to flee. And he's there when the news arrives that his father has been beheaded.
He was only 15.
People grew up a bit quicker in the 17th century. The markers of adulthood and things like marriage are earlier. But 15 is still an impressionable age, and it does devastate James. And he becomes intensely loyal to his brother, whom he regards from that moment in 1649 as Charles II. But there's a decade in which he becomes quite the soldier. He's immensely brave, and his soldiers love him as their leader. And he serves in the armies of the French royal family. But the French start to make rapprochement with this new English republic, and James can't do that. He can't be a part of that. So he goes to Spain. At this point, he's really surrounded by Catholics. His mother is a Catholic, and whilst the eldest brother Charles knows that to convert to Catholicism will spell disaster for any hope of the monarchy being restored, James does become more receptive and gets a much more positive view of Catholicism than he maybe had growing up in England. He goes to the Netherlands, which is where his sister has married into the Orange family.
This is Mary of William and Orange.
Quite a few English royalist exiles have gathered there, and one of them is Anne Hyde, whose father had been a chancellor for his father, and they have a very torrid affair, and Anne ends up pregnant and then marrying her. To his credit, he sticks with Anne. He doesn't try to annul the marriage even when the monarchy is restored, but he does have quite a number of illegitimate children, not as many as his brother Charles II, but he does have quite a few, and he, like his brother, acknowledges most of them, and the children are quite loyal to him. When the monarchy is restored and he goes back and Anne is the new Duchess of York, there's still tensions within the royal family, particularly from his mother about his new wife. From that marriage, we do get two future monarchs, Mary II and Queen Anne, although they're both quite young when tragically breast cancer kills their mother. And it's by this point James has privately converted to Catholicism, but it's his second marriage that brings it to the fore. He certainly is interested in Catholicism during the time of his first marriage. The evidence we would have indicates that he had, to all intents and purposes, become a Catholic before his first wife's death. But the public's perception of it gathers momentum with his second marriage to an Italian woman called Mary Beatrice of Modena. On paper, Mary Beatrice is the perfect royal consort for the 17th century. She's elegant, she's beautiful, she's charming, but none of that matters because she is a very devout Catholic. And she gets the blame from the English public for corrupting her husband into becoming a Catholic, and that's not true at all. But in the time of his second marriage, he does start to refuse Anglican communion, and at that point we see the Catholicism shift from a private matter into a political one. This is where it starts to become a massive problem for the country because he will one day be Supreme Governor of the Church of England. The exclusion crisis happens, which is around 1679, and it is to technically, as its name suggests, exclude James from the throne on the basis of his religion, which at this point is not yet a legal requirement of the British sovereign. However, its long-term consequences of the exclusion crisis are incalculable because a lot of people would say it gives us the two-party system. It gives birth to the Tories who defend James's right and the Whigs who will later be the progenitors of the liberal and progressivist movement in the country are the ones trying to stop. James survives the exclusion crisis because his brother refuses to let them tamper with the succession. Charles has married a Portuguese princess, also a Catholic, and there are no legitimate children. And that is how James becomes James II in England and Ireland and James VII for Scotland when Charles II dies in 1685.
So at that point, at the moment Charles II died, was there any controversy about him taking over?
Yeah, there was. So there was a rebellion by one of Charles II's bastards, the Duke of Monmouth, and James crushes it with initially what's regarded as appropriate force and quickly becomes regarded even by the rebellion's opponents as excessive force. So there's some things that will inevitably play horribly to the public, like Monmouth, it takes so many swings of the axe to get the Duke's head off, which just makes it doubly tragic.
And he was seen effectively as the devil incarnate. He was even accused of starting the Great Fire of London.
Yeah, because he's a Catholic, James is accused of having started the Great Fire of London, but it ignores the fact that he actually led the firefighting brigades to put it out. You certainly see a surge of support for him in Ireland, which is the only kingdom he rules with a majority Catholic population. But there is massive unrest, particularly in London, and it comes to a boil with his wife's pregnancy. So Mary Beatrice had had devastating luck with her pregnancy. Several of the children had died as infants. Her daughter Isabella had died at 6, so there has been this run of heartbreaks. And in 1688, 3 years after James becomes king, Queen Mary Beatrice finally gives birth to a son, also called James. And Mary Beatrice, to give her credit, despite how deep her Catholic faith was, she had been a very pragmatic ecumenicalist beforehand. She had accepted a Protestant coronation, she made sure to have as many Protestant ladies in waiting, etc. But the ecumenicalism stopped at the nursery door, and she could not, in good conscience, let her son be brought up a Protestant. And so in that inverse pyramid of lunacy comes the warming pan baby theory, which is that she wasn't really pregnant and that her priests smuggled a healthy peasant child into the warming pan, flipped it over in the bed and passed it off as a
prince.
And
this was widely believed, wasn't it?
Widely believed. And despite, you had Catholics and Protestants who were in the room and saw the birth and said, I saw this happen. But Mary Beatrice, interestingly, I think knew it was coming because her stepdaughter, Princess Anne, who loathed her, had been making sly comments that the bump wasn't real and didn't she look very well rested. And she's made a comment saying, unless I see the Queen and the child parted, I'll not believe it's real. So Mary Beatrice invites Princess Anne to witness the labour at St James's Palace, and Anne conveniently gets sick the day before, so she can't go. So she has the plausible deniability to start launching this rumour. the impact of that lie is staggering when you think about it. So London is convulsed by riots. He is very unpopular by this stage. He has introduced policies that try to introduce religious toleration, which is not popular. And he also has rolled back the city's liberties, and he is trying to push in a more absolutist direction politically. But you have the Queen of England having to disguise herself as a laundress and run through the streets with her baby under her clothes to try to get to a boat to get out. Genuinely a terrifying few weeks in London, especially if you were Catholic or linked to the court. The Queen and the Prince of Wales do make it to France, and Parliament and the Protestant lobby issue an invitation to James's Protestant daughter from his first marriage, Mary, who's married her cousin, Prince William of Orange. And he arrives with an army to save parliamentary rule and Protestantism. William takes the throne in joint sovereignty as William III and Mary II, and James is aware that the only reason the monarchy survived the first time is because some of his family got out when he was a child, and he flees and he goes to France as well. But the future for him, he was facing huge odds at this stage. So Louis XIV does provide him with an army. He goes back to Ireland. So William lands in the north, James lands in the south, and they meet in the middle, and James loses the Battle of the Boyne, and he flees. He ran all the way back to France, and he spent the rest of his life there. He never formally abdicated, so Jacobites would say the reign went up until his death in the first year of the 18th century. I don't think you can doubt the sincerity of his devotion to Catholicism. I think that he was prepared to lose the crown over it, and he became increasingly devout. He becomes very, very devoted to the rituals of his faith. He starts to diet more regularly and keeping with religious fasts. So he dies piously, and he's buried in one of the English Catholic churches there. The grave, like so many royal graves, is ransacked during the Revolution in the 1789-1790. But the Jacobite cause lingers on after him for about half a century. The Jacobite literature, it's all about his son or grandson. It's not really ever about him. Even the most devoted Jacobites cannot really make James II a romantic figure. He's a figure you follow through duty rather than necessarily through affection.
I'm Mark Vinette, and I hope you're enjoying the ride.